It was a disorder where wild senses were actively pusyon, spirit particles, and sion, thought particles, are particles observed in parapsychological phenomena, which included magic as well as comprised of non-physical entities that neither corresponded to fermions, or particles that make out the composition of matter, nor were they the same as bosons, which bring about the interaction between matter. Sions were particle manifestations of intention and thought, while pusyons could be thought of as particle manifestations of the emotions brought about by intention and thought. A pity that this was still at the hypothetical stage. Normally, it was sion that was used in magic and in technology systems of modern magic. Emphasis was placed on the control of sion. Magicians first started learning how to manipulate sion. People who suffered from oversensitivity to spirit particle emission, a hereditary disorder, showed symptoms of being oversensitive to spirit particle emission, non-physical light generated depending on the activity of pusyon. Those who were visually exposed to spirit particle emission would have their emotional state affected. Consequently, pusyon were hypothesized to be particles formed by emotion, and the result of person suffering from oversensitivity to spirit particle emission tended to be susceptible to the breakdown of his or her mental stability. Fundamentally, to prevent that required control over pusyon activity, and to those who are unable to do so require a technological aid. One of those aids were glasses made from a special kind of lenses known as aura cut coating lenses. In reality, to magicians, oversensitivity to spirit particle emissions was not that rare of a condition. The magician's sensitivity to pusyon and sensitivity to sion were more or less directly proportional. The number of magicians who consciously manipulated sion and were troubled by being oversensitive to the radiation of spirit particles fell on the higher side. One could even say that it was something that could not be helped. However, it would indeed be rare to see a person who had this as a disorder that he or she needed to constantly block the spirit particle emission with glasses. That would not be a concern because of a lesser manipulative ability, but if it was put to an extremely superior sensitivity, that would be bad news for Tatsuya, though it would be the opposite for the person in question. Tatsuya had a secret. It was a secret that could not be uncovered from his outward appearance alone. That's not of concern, but if he did have those special eyes that would allow her to sense pusyon and sion as if they were completely visible to her, his secret might be discovered by random chance. He would have to be much more alert and act cautiously whenever she was around. Shiba Erika, nice to meet you. Shiba Kun, nice to meet you too. The voice of the young woman sitting beside Mizuki cut off Tatsuya's thought. That was a welcome interruption. Tatsuya's look had unconsciously turned into a stare, and Mizuki's bashfulness was pretty much approaching its limit, but it had gone unnoticed by Tatsuya. But can I say that this is an interesting coincidence? Different from her friend, Erika appeared to be an extrovert and of an unreserved type. Her short, bright hair and her distinct facial features amplified the expressions of her being a lively girl. What is? Well, we know that we are Shiba, Shibata, and Shiba, right? Don't we right somehow, so they are different. I see. He could not understand what he meant with that. But still, Shiba, another numbered one. I did thought that the Shiba house had a daughter by the name of Erika, but possible that she's of collateral descent. As he thought about that really interesting, a somewhat out of place laugh escaped from him, as it was not to the extent that it drew cold look from those around him. After the remaining two students of the other side of Erika had finished introducing themselves, Tatsuya felt like satisfying his trivial curiosity. For the four of you from the same middle school, Erika's reply was an unexpected one. So, all of us just met for the first time. Tatsuya's surprised look might have been a striking for Erika started giggling as he explained. I didn't know where this place was and I was staring at the information board. That's when Mizuki called out to me. Information board? That's strange, thought Tatsuya. The data for the school entrance ceremony included the location of the venue and had been sent to all the new students. By using the LPS or local positioning system, a standard feature in a mobile terminal, even if a new student didn't read the information board or remember any of the information, one student goes one way. The three of us didn't bring our data terminals. While the virtual screen models are banned and I had to take a school entrance guide starting mine. We managed to lock into the school after all. The students make sense to get marked off right at the school entrance ceremony. I forgot mine actually. So that's the reason for you, huh? You really couldn't accept it. It's your own school entrance ceremony. At least verify the location of the video before coming. He thought honestly to himself but didn't say a word. There was no need to stir up any meaningless trouble thinking about that. Tatsuya restrained himself. Miyuki's orientation address was outstanding as expected. Tatsuya had never the slightest thought that his little sister would fumble at something like that. Even though she was all fired up and included a number of pretty dangerous phrases like everyone alike as a single body aside from magic or in an integrated manner, she managed to set them up properly and they didn't sound thorny at all. Her openness, innocence and modesty, coupled with her lovely, beautiful appearance, had captured the hearts of not just the guys, the freshmen, but the upperclassmen as well. Miyuki would probably be surrounded by commotion from tomorrow onward. That was not an unusual thing. Using the society standards, one could call Tatsuya a siscon from the way he pampered her. He wanted to commend her immediately, but unfortunately what followed immediately after the ceremony was the issuing of the ID card. If the individual cards were not made beforehand, the arrangement was to have each and every person go in a certain place to personally have their data written in the cards meant for use within the school premises. So whichever counter they went to, the procedure could be completed. Here a wall naturally appeared in Tatsuya's heart. Miyuki probably undoubtedly skipped a step as the freshman representative. He had probably already been conferred with his card. And right now, in the midst of the visitors and student crowd, Shiba-kun, which class are you in? Erika, with a face that could not hide her excitement, asked Tatsuya, who was the last in line among the group. In other words, he was practicing the ladies' first rule, Class E. On hearing Tatsuya's reply, yeah, we are in the same class, Erika hopped up and down happily. She seemed to be overdoing it, but I am in the same class as well. With just the accompanying action visiting, Mizuki also had a similar face, so this might be a natural reaction for freshmen. I'm in Class F, I'm in Class G. Even so, it was not like the reactions of the remaining two were cold and unfeeling. After all, they were in high spirits about enrolling in a high school. The school had 8 year 1 classes, and each class had 25 students. In this respect, they were equal. In the first place, the weeds were not expected to bloom into flowers in place in classes each week, and the blooms who were expected to bloom into large flowers were never mixed among them. The two girls who were assigned to different classes naturally went along that way. It seemed like the two of them were headed towards their homerooms, even though classes A to D and classes E to H were located on different levels. It did not appear that their enthusiasm was any the less for that. It was not like the four students would stick around together in one group. There was also a number of them who were turning their backs to be proud about getting accepted to a reputable school. Since this school was also ranked among the top in the country in areas not performing to magic, the two of them probably went off to search for new friends among those whom they would spend the rest of the year with. What shall we do? Shall we look at their homeroom as well? Erika asked as she looked up the face of Tatsuya. While Mizuki didn't ask, she was probably looking up at Tatsuya. Save for a few schools were continuing the old traditions. These days, high schools did not employ the system of having homeroom teachers. Administrative circulars did not need to be handed out one by one, and besides, there was not that much budget to waste on such human resources, so the circulars were distributed to the terminals that were connected throughout the entire school. A system of having one terminal for school use assigned to each individual had already been in existence decades ago. Except for individual instruction or practical lessons, almost everything was done using the data terminals. Before care was needed, counselors who held expertise in multiple disciplines should be assigned by the school. So the reason homerooms were needed was for the convenience of practical and experimental lessons. When practical and experimental lessons ended with time, so as not to have a time surplus, they needed somewhere to hold a certain number of people. Notwithstanding, lesson was a daily affair. Besides, with the personal terminal system, it also made some things very convenient. No matter what background people came from, once they spent the time in the same room lengthened, they would mingle with one another naturally. By dispensing with the homeroom teacher system, the bond between classmates tended to strengthen. At any one rate, if anyone wanted to make new friends, going to the classroom was the fastest route for that, but Tatsuya took his hand at Erika's invitation. Sorry, I'm meeting up with my little sister. There were no lessons or further things to be communicated to them for today. Tatsuya had an agreement with Miyuki to go back together immediately after the procedures were done. If it's Shiba-kun's little sister, then she must be really cute, right? On hearing Erika's thoughtful and questioning murmur, Tatsuya was troubled on how he should answer her. If it's his little sister, then she must be cute. What could that mean? Thought Tatsuya. He felt that he couldn't quite connect the cause and effect well. Fortunately, he really didn't need to force himself to answer that. Could your little sister be the representative of freshman Miyuki? Since Mizuki had asked a more basic question this time around, there was no need for him to hesitate. A nod from Tatsuya was enough to confirm that the answer to the question. Really? Then are you twins? The question from Erika was a natural one. To Tatsuya, it was a question that he had heard since young. I have often been asked that, but we are not twins. I was born in April while she was born in March. If I were born 1 month earlier or she was born 1 month later, then would it be the same school year? I guess that makes things really complicated. When a little sister was a high achiever in the same school year, it was bound to be complicated, but Erika did not ask that with any panic then. Tatsuya's mouth let the question slide. That aside, it's surprising you can tell Shiba is not that far of a family name after all. On hearing Tatsuya's replies, the two young ladies smiled faintly. No, it's pretty rare. However, the way she said it gave off a consistently different feel, in contrast to Erika's smile, which was mixed in with a sense of freeness. Her features look alike. Mizuki's without smile appeared to lack confidence. Do it look alike? I wonder if Tatsuya's head did not turn at Mizuki's words the same way that Erika's words does now, as if his highlighting tone had taken root. Mizuki's words felt unreal to him. Rather, he could not believe them. Even if one didn't actively look for the good points of Mizuki, she was a rare beauty. Even if you took away all her superfluous talents just by doing that, she would not be able to help but gather attention. The born idol, Noah Star, looked at his little sister. He could understand that the idiom, God does not give to him, was but an unpleasant lie. Conversely, he was himself perhaps above the norm or above average. Tatsuya evaluated himself. During middle school, one took her one love letters. To Tatsuya, they appeared as fan letters. For Soap and his little sister, Tatsuya had never received one such thing. Even they were only partially, they shouldn't still inherit the same genes, but even Tatsuya doubted not just once or twice whether they were blood related or not. If you put it that way, you do look alike. Shiba-kun is quite the hunk as well. It just kind of feels like your features can be more similar to that. Just as Erika replied to Tatsuya's query, Mizuki also nodded in agreement. Hunk, you said, which obsolete word from that, but which era is that? And it doesn't mean that if you take away my face, there's no resemblance between us, right? Feeling-wise, Erika's words might be a little difficult to understand, but it seemed like it was just not their faces that look alike. After Tatsuya had interpreted this as such, he made a dull jab at her. That's not it. How should I put it? It seems like Erika couldn't express it quite well. If not for Mizuki's lifeline, she would probably be fumbling for a while. It's your aura. Your dignified features look alike, as expected of siblings. That's right, aura. It's your aura. Slapping her own thigh, Erika gave a strong nod as well. This time it was Tatsuya's turn to smile really. Shiba-san, aren't you someone who gets carried away easily? Carried away? You're so cruel. She started protesting, but he let it slide. From her tone, it was not like Erika was really flaring up at his comment. Thank you, aside, Shibata-san. It's amazing for you to be able to tell by your auras. Your eyes must be really good. But it was Erika who jumped at his words with a deep implication woven into them. Mizuki is wearing glasses, you know. I don't mean that. Besides, Shibata-san's classes have no degree in them, right? Erika peered into Mizuki's glasses with a bewildered face. On the other side of these lenses, Mizuki's eyes widened and hardened. Was he surprised at being seen through, or was he chagrined at a secret of hers being discovered? Whichever it was, it seemed to Tatsuya that it was something of no consequence to her, as to why she had made such a face that no chance to inquire about it. The time was up. It was probably for the best for now. Oni-sama, sorry for the wait. From behind Tatsuya and the rest, who was talking in the corner near the exit of the auditorium, the voice of the person behind. He had been waiting for a call out. Miyuki slipped out from the crowd surrounding her. Initially, Tatsuya felt that she was a little early, but thinking about his little sister's character again was perhaps just about time. Even though she wasn't one who would shy away from socialization, it was undeniable that she had a tendency to be obsessively displeased with flattery and compliments. While you could say that she was behaving like a child, since she was young, there had been no lack of opportunities for her to receive praise, and among them, the times when such compliments were quoted with a mix of jealousy and envy numbered not just a handful. If you think about that, then it was quite understandable that she would be somewhat suspicious of the adulation she received. You can say that even if that she was bringing it quite well for today, you were quick, was what he intended to say as he turned around, but even though the words remained the same as planned, his intonation turned into a questioning tone. Questioning what? Accompanying the person he was expecting from behind was someone whom he had been. Hello, Shibako-kun, we meet again. In response to that amiable, disarming smiling face and words, Tatsuya nodded his head without saying anything. Despite his inadequate acknowledgement to his courteousness, the smile of the student council president, Saikusa Mayumi, did not give way in the slightest. Perhaps it was a type of poker face of hers, or perhaps this was something inborn in this young lady who was older in age. Which it was, Tatsuya, who had only just met her, could not tell, but more than the elder brother's strange response to the student council president, his little sister appeared to be bothered by the two young ladies who had snuggled up intimately to her big brother besides him. Onisama, they are, before explaining her own situation to why she was not allowed, Miyuki was seeking out an explanation of why Tatsuya was not allowed, even though he was a little taken back by her abruptness. He had nothing to hide. Tatsuya answered without a second delay. This is Shibata Mizuki-san, and that is Shiba Erika-san. We're in the same class. I see. Isn't it a little too soon to be dating your classmates? With her adorable head tilted to the side, it is not like I have something against it. Miyuki's face seemed to say as she asked. Her lips formed a ladylike smile, but her eyes were not smiling. Oh my, thought Tatsuya. It seems like immediately after the ceremony, she has been bombarded with flattery from left and right, setting her on edge, resulting in plenty of accumulated stress. There's no way that could happen, right, Miyuki? We were just chatting while waiting for you. You are being rude to both of them, aren't you? His little sister's pouting face looked cute to him, but not give her own name after being introduced to the other party might not be favorable for her reputation in front of the upperclassmen in the same year students. Upon seeing Tatsuya's slightly reproachful eyes, a look of resignation flashed across her face for an instant, and following that, Miyuki fixed up an even more gracious smile on her face. Good day, Shiba-san, I am Shiba Miyuki. I'm also a freshman just like Onisama, so I look forward to being in your care. I am Shibata Mizuki, Xavier also looks forward to being in your care. Nice to meet you. You can just call me Erika. Can I call you Miyuki? Yes. Please don't. It will be hard to distinguish between my brother and I from our family name. The three young women introduced themselves to one another again. The greetings exchange between Miyuki and Mizuki seemed appropriate for people who have met for the first time, but for Erika, right from the start, she was surprisingly, if this is the right way to put it, friendly. However, only Tatsuya felt bewildered at Erika's forward manner of speaking. There was no sign of Miyuki being bothered by the most overly familiar behavior from her nod. Aha, Miyuki, I didn't expect you to be so sociable from your outward appearance. You are just as candid as you appear to be. Nice to meet you, Erika. After getting exasperated by all of the flattery and compliments, it was understandable that she would be quite fond of Erika's frank attitude, but it seemed like both of them had somehow acquired a mutual understanding beyond that. Miyuki and Erika were both exchanging unreserved smiles with each other. While Tatsuya could not help but feel left behind, it would not do to remain rooted there, since the group of the student council who had followed his little sister were of the same crowd. They weren't really obstructing anyone, but because of this, If they continue to stand around here, there will become an obstacle to people who would want to pass through. Miyuki, are you done with your business with the student council? If you're not, I can go kill some time myself, you know? It's fine. No one who had replied to Tatsuya's question and suggested was the other party. I'm just here to say hello for today. Miyuki said, may I call you that as well? Yes, as Mayumi addressed her. Miyuki nodded, her unreserved smile replaced by a solemn expression. Well then, Miyuki will catch up on another date. Mayumi bade goodbye lightly with a smiling face and started to make her exit out of the auditorium. However, one of the accompanying male students at the back called Mayumi to stop. Out on his chest, blooming proudly as it were a natural thing, was an 8-petaled flower emblem. But President, what about the schedule on our side? We really didn't make an appointment beforehand. If she already had another appointment, she should give that priority, right? After the male students who appeared, the one to press further was restrained by her eyes. Mayumi gave a meaningful smile to Miyuki and Tatsuya. Well then, Miyuki-san, I shall take my leave. Shiba-kun as well. I'd love to catch up with you one of those days. After greeting them again, Mayumi left. Following that, the male student was following behind her turned around and he glared at Tatsuya so hard it was as if one could hear his tongue clicking. Now shall we go back? While he had somehow managed to provoke the displeasure of not just the upperclassmen but the student council executive members as well, when he had just enrolled to school, it was something quite beyond his control. Of course, it was not like he was going to experience a smooth sailing life where he could just brood over things like that. Despite that, having less than a full 16 years of life experience, Tatsuya had already experienced negativity to such a degree. I'm sorry, Odisama, because of me, people are getting a bad impression. It's nothing you need to apologize for. Without letting the distressed-looking Miyuki finish her sentence, Tatsuya brought his hand up and placed it on Miyuki's head, the side with a small pat. As he continued to stroke her hair in a calming fashion, her downcast face being colored with an enraptured expression. To any onlooker, this pair of siblings appeared to be approaching a dangerous boundary. But perhaps still withdrawing the reservations because of having just met the siblings, Miyuki and Erika as well said nothing about it. Well, since we are all here, why don't we go have a nice cup of tea? Sounds great. There seems to be a nice cake shop around. In other words, it was a tea time invitation. There was no need to ask them whether their families were waiting for them. Asking such a thing would probably be a needless consideration. It was the same for Tatsuya and Miyuki. At the time, Tatsuya had something else to ask. Sure, it was really an insignificant thing, but it was something that would not him if he didn't ask. He didn't check up on where the school entrance ceremony would be held, and yet you know where a cake shop is. It might be a question of a slightly teasing nature. Of course, it's something important, isn't it? But Erika nodded confidently without the slightest bit of hesitation. Of course, His acknowledgement turned into a groan, but as if it were someone else's business, Tatsuya thought that someone would receive the brunt of that. Oni-sama, what do you think? But it seemed like Tatsuya was the only one shocked at Erika's brash remarks. Even Miyuki did not appear to have paid heed to the lack of common sense in prioritizing a confectionery over the ceremony venue. So in the first place, Miyuki was not familiar with the details of the whole story. Well, sounds good. After all, we just got acquainted with one another. Be it the same gender or the same year, we won't find another friend too many. Even though he said that he had not really put much thought into his assenting response. There was no particularly pressing matter awaiting him at home either. Originally, Tatsuya did not think they should go somewhere to spend the afternoon to commemorate his younger sister's enrollment before going home. Since it was not a well-thought lie, it offhandedly reflected his true voice. Apparently, since it was his true voice speaking, Erika and Miyuki returned their words in this manner. Shiba-kun, when I say comes to Miyuki, you don't ponder too deeply over it. You really care about your sister, don't you? Whether just a compliment or a comment from blank amazement before it was their differing gazes combined, Tatsuya could only remain silent with a bitter face. The cake shop that Erika brought them to was in fact a French cafe with delicious dessert. They took their lunch there and spent some time chatting merrily. It was the three girls talking, and Tatsuya was only listening, and by the time they got home, it was close to evening. There was no one to welcome them. The house, which vastly exceeded the average in size, appeared to be inhabited by just Tatsuya and Miyoki. He returned to his room and took off his uniform first. He really didn't want to think that such a makeshift mantle could affect him that much, but after taking off the blazer that was intentionally fashioned to look different, he felt a little lighter. He clicked his tongue once at these feelings of his and quickly finished changing. As he was relaxing in the living room, before long, Miyoki, who had finished changing, came down from her room. Even though materials had become much more advanced, apparel design had largely remained the same as 100 years ago. With her beautiful, shapely legs revealed below the star skirt of a style from the start of the century, Miyoki approached him. For some reason, his little sister's fashion sense tended towards a more revealing nature at home, even though he seemed to be more or less used to it. Her consider of the increased femininity due to his frequently caused Tatsuya to be feel troubled about where he should rest his case. Onisama, would you like something to drink? Sounds good. I would like a coffee then. Certainly. As she headed toward the kitchen, her loosely bound ponytail swayed behind her slender back. It was to prevent her hair from interfering with her kitchen work on the bleeding closet of the bare neck of her neck. Calmly covered by her long hair, an inexpressible loveliness radiated from the center of the white neckline of her clothing. In an advanced country where the use of car or home automation robots was widespread, women as well as men who enrolled themselves in kitchen work belonged to the minority. There were few people who performed any actual cooking in general. Toasted bread, brewing coffee, owned as unless it was a hobby. Miyoki it was not because she was technologically challenged, but friends gave the visit. She would normally leave it to the HAR, but together with just Tatsuya alone, she would definitely opt to perform the labor herself. The grinding sound from the beans and bubbling sounds of boiling water eventually reached Tatsuya's ears. She could be said to be pretty hung up to even go to the extent of using a other than using an old coffee maker model. He had tried asking her once in her airplane, but that she wanted to go in that way, so it was probably indeed a hobby for her. He probably recalled the time when he had asked her whether it was a hobby, and she glared at him with a pouting face. At any rate, the coffee Miyoki brewed was most suitable to Tatsuya's taste. Onisama, here you go. He placed the cup on the side table, came around from the other side, and sat beside him. On the table was lapped, although once he held had to taste really good, but no need to compliment further. And the thought Miyoki broke into a grin, and peering into the satisfied face of her elder brother with her smiling eyes, her deep look suspicious on her face as he brought the cup to her mouth. That was the usual Miyoki. With that, the two of them sipped the coffee. Neither of them struck up a forced conversation. Both of them were not bothered by the presence of the other person besides themselves. The times when it felt uncomfortable to not speak to each other for a long period of time has long since passed. The topics they could talk about were plenty. I think what was the school entrance ceremony. They had made new friends, and for some reason they had encountered where some upperclassmen. Miyoki was invited by the student council as expected. The things that could be recalled and the things that could be discussed were too many for one night. But facing that pair of siblings in that house of theirs were merely cups being tilted in silence. It's almost time to make dinner. Holding her empty cup, Miyoki stood up, handing over his coffee cup to his little sister's outstretched hand. Tatsuya also stood up. The evening deepened into sight as usual for the two siblings.